Caleb Ward saw the tracks first. Then, barefoot, dragging. Spring snow does not forgive the lost. He followed anyway. Across white pasture and silent cedar. Wind whispering trouble through the drifts. Then the trail ended beside a fallen fence. A woman lay there. Bones and breath. Nothing more. Her lips moved when Caleb knelt. Don't turn back, cowboy. Snow darkened beneath her hand. Riders were coming over the ridge behind him. Caleb Ward looked east. Looked at the starving stranger. Then reached for his rifle. Spring had just turned into war. Before we ride deeper into the story, hit subscribe, ring the bell, so you'll never miss another ride through the legends of the Wild West. Now, let's get back to the trail. Morning came slow over Caleb Ward's ranch. Spring snow lay thin across the pasture, white crust over tired brown grass. Wind slid through the broken rails of the fence and whispered across empty land. The cabin door opened with a long wooden groan. Caleb stepped out with the tin cup of black coffee warming his hand. No voices. No neighbors. Only the soft scrape of wind against the barn siding. That was how Caleb Ward liked it. Quiet enough that a man could hear his own ghosts. Boot leather pressed into the snow as he crossed the yard. Each step made a dull crunch that carried across the frozen ground. His horse shifted in the corral and snorted steam into the pale morning air. Caleb lifted his eyes toward the far pasture. Something had crossed the land. Tracks. Not hooves. Feet. Bare feet. Thin prints cutting through the snow like a desperate line. Caleb stared at them a long moment. The wind pushed harder across the field, rattling the loose barn door behind him. A man with sense would turn back inside. Let the world solve its own troubles. Caleb Ward had learned that lesson the hard way. Still, those tracks pulled at him. He set the cup on the fence rail. Coffee sloshed softly against the tin. Boots moved again. Crunch. Crunch. The trail led across the pasture, through a break in the fence where winter storms had split the cedar post. Snow gathered deeper there. The prints dragged now. Slower. Uneven. Like the person making them had run out of strength. Caleb walked another 100 yards before he saw her. A shape against the drift. A woman lay half-folded beside the broken fence rail. Her dress was thin and stiff with frost. Bare feet blew against the snow. Wind lifted strands of dark hair across her face. Caleb crouched down. The snow creaked softly beneath his knees. For a moment he thought she was already gone. Then her chest moved. Barely. His breath left him in a long cloud. "Hell of a place to fall down," he muttered. Her eyelids trembled. The woman's hand moved weakly through the snow until her fingers caught the sleeve of his coat. Cold. Sharp as ice. Her lips cracked open. "Don't turn back, cowboy." Her voice scraped thin as dry grass. Caleb followed the direction of her shaking hand. Beyond the white ridge far to the east, dark shapes moved along the horizon. Riders. Even at that distance he could hear it. Faint. Steel jingling. Leather creaking. Horses pushing through crusted snow. Caleb Ward closed his eyes once. A tired man's breath. Trouble had found his ranch again. He slipped an arm beneath the starving woman and lifted her from the drift. Snow fell from her dress in soft powder. The wind rose across the pasture. Behind them the riders kept coming. The stove snapped sharp when Caleb pushed another log into the fire. Flames climbed slow through the iron grate. Warmth spread through the cabin in quiet waves. Anna Mercer lay beneath 2 wool blankets, her breath thin but steady. Snow melt dripped from the hem of her dress and tapped softly onto the floorboards. Caleb stood beside the bed with a tin cup of broth warming his hands. Outside the wind pushed across the pasture, brushing loose snow against the cabin walls. A hollow whisper. The kind of sound that made a man feel alone even when he wasn't. Anna's eyelids fluttered again. Her lips parted slightly, Caleb leaned forward and tipped the cup. Slow. The broth touched her mouth. She swallowed once. Coughed hard. The sound cracked through the still cabin like a rifle shot. Caleb steadied her shoulders until the coughing eased. Another swallow. Then another. Color crept back into her cheeks, faint as sunrise behind cloud. The stove popped again, louder this time. Anna opened her eyes fully. Dark eyes. Sharp even through exhaustion. She looked at the fire first. Then the walls. Then Caleb. You dragged me off the snow. Caleb shrugged once. Snow was winning. Her voice rasped. Riders were close. They still are. Anna closed her eyes briefly. Not in fear. In calculation. When she opened them again, she studied the rifle leaning beside the door. You always keep that close. Closer than most folks. The wind outside slapped once against the roof. Loose shingles rattled. Anna drank the last of the broth. Caleb set the empty cup on the table. The metal clink echoed small in the quiet room. For a while neither of them spoke. Only the fire talking. Crackle. Snap. A slow breathing warmth filling the space. Anna tried to push herself upright. Her arms trembled. Caleb stepped forward and pressed her gently back into the blankets. You'll stay put. I'm not made of glass. You're made of bone and hunger. She gave a tired smile. Fair enough. The room settled again. Cabinwood shifting with soft groans. Outside the wind eased, leaving a strange silence across the ranch. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that carried sound far. Caleb turned his head slightly. Listening. At first there was nothing. Then faint. Very faint. Leather creaking somewhere across the valley. Horse hooves striking frozen ground. Far away. But not far enough. Anna saw his expression change. They're still tracking. Maybe. You heard them. Caleb moved to the window. The curtain brushed softly aside. Snowfields stretched empty toward the ridge. No riders yet. Only the pale shine of morning light across the drifts. Still. Tracks remained. Barefoot prints cutting straight to his fence line. Caleb let the curtain fall. When he turned back, Anna was watching the door. You should send me away before they reach this place. Caleb walked back to the stove. Poured water into the kettle. Metal rang softly. They won't reach it today. You don't know that. The kettle began to murmur as heat built beneath it. Caleb spoke without looking at her. I know storms slow horses. Anna listened. Outside the wind rose again, stronger now. Snow hissed against the cabin wall. Storm rolling back over the valley. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. You're buying time. Storm's buying time. The kettle whistled low. Caleb poured hot water into another cup. Coffee this time. The smell filled the room, rich and bitter. Anna swung her legs carefully over the edge of the bed. Her bare feet touched the floor. Cold wood. She sucked in a breath. Easy. Caleb slid a pair of thick socks toward her. She pulled them on slowly. The cabin floor creaked under her first step. One step. Then another. The sound echoed in the quiet room. Caleb watched but said nothing. Anna reached the small table and steadied herself with one hand. Her fingers brushed the rough wood. Feels strange, she said softly. What does? Standing inside walls again. The fire popped loudly. Anna flinched before she could stop herself. Caleb noticed. He poured another cup of broth and handed it to her. She held it close. Warmth rising into her hands. Outside the wind roared harder across the pasture. Fence wire hummed like a low violin. Anna took a slow sip. Her voice dropped. They won't stop searching. Caleb leaned back in his chair. Boot heels resting against the stove. They always do. No. Her gaze lifted to the door again. These men don't stop. The wind shoved against the cabin once more, hard enough to rattle the hinges. Caleb listened to the storm, then to the quiet behind it. Snow falling thicker now, tracks disappearing beneath white. For the moment the prairie was swallowing every trail, buying silence, buying time. Anna looked down into the steaming cup. "Why help me?" Caleb watched the fire, flames bending around the log. "Didn't help you?" Anna raised an eyebrow. "You were inside my house," he said. Storm made the decision. For a moment Anna almost laughed. The sound surprised them both. Soft. Human. The cabin held that small noise like a fragile thing. Warmth filled the room. Snow buried the world outside. And somewhere beyond the white hills, riders kept searching for a woman who had just begun to breathe again. Morning crept slow across the ranch. The storm had moved east during the night. Snow lay soft against the pasture, pale and quiet. Smoke curled from Caleb Ward's chimney and drifted low across the yard. Inside the cabin the stove cracked and hissed. Anna Mercer stood near the small window with a wool blanket around her shoulders. Sunlight touched the frost along the glass. Outside the world looked clean. Silent. Caleb pushed the door open with his boot. Cold air followed him inside. He carried a bucket that sloshed softly with water. The door shut behind him with a hollow thud. Anna turned. "You went out early. Stock needed water." He set the bucket beside the stove. Steam lifted slow from the rim. Anna watched him move through the room. Quiet man. Heavy boots. Every step made the floorboards complain. She had begun to recognize those sounds already. The cabin had its own language. Fire popping. Wood shifting. Wind brushing the roof. She moved toward the table. A broom leaned against the wall. She picked it up. The straw brushed across the floor with soft dry whispers. Caleb paused halfway through pouring coffee. "You don't need to do that." Anna swept another line of melted snow from the boards. "I know." Dust and frost gathered into a small pile. The broom kept moving. Slow. Careful. "Feels better than lying still." Caleb said nothing. Coffee poured into 2 tin cups. The smell filled the warm air. Anna finished sweeping and set the broom back against the wall. She wrapped both hands around the cup Caleb offered. Heat pushed into her fingers. Outside the corral gate creaked in the wind. Anna glanced toward the door. Her shoulders tightened. Caleb noticed. "Just the hinge." "I know." But her eyes stayed on the door another moment before she drank. Silence settled again. Comfortable this time. Later the sun rose higher. Snow softened across the pasture. Caleb worked beside the barn repairing a broken rail. Hammer striking iron nails. Thunk. Thunk. The sound traveled far in the clear air. Anna stepped from the cabin slowly. The cold touched her face. Not cruel anymore. Just sharp. She walked toward the fence. Mud sucked softly at her boots. Caleb glanced up when she approached. "You should still be resting." "I rested enough." She picked up the loose rails stacked beside the barn. The wood knocked lightly together as she carried them. Caleb frowned. "You'll wear yourself down." Anna set the rails in a neat pile. "I've been worn down before." The hammer struck again. Thunk. A crow called somewhere along the ridge. The ranch felt almost alive again. Then the horse in the corral lifted its head suddenly. Ears forward. Breath snorting white. Caleb stopped hammering. The silence returned hard. Both of them listened. Far away. Very faint. A distant echo of hooves against frozen ground. Not many. Maybe 2 riders. Too far to see. Close enough to matter. Anna's voice dropped low. "They're still looking." Caleb leaned the hammer against the fence. "Maybe. They'll ask in town." "Maybe." Her hands tightened on the rail. "You don't understand these men." Caleb picked up another nail. "Men are men." The hammer fell again. Thunk. But the rhythm had changed. Slower. Listening between every strike. By afternoon the wind shifted warmer. Water dripped from the barn roof. Tap. 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 Anna sat near the cabin steps mending a torn shirt with needle and thread. The thread slid softly through cloth. Caleb worked nearby splitting wood. Each swing of the axe cracked sharp across the yard. Anna paused. "Quiet place you built here." Caleb stacked another log. "Quiet suits me." She watched him a moment. "Didn't always." Caleb didn't answer. The axe lifted again. Crack. Wood split clean. Silence followed. Anna lowered her eyes back to the needle. Thread pulling tight. After a while she spoke again. "They'll bring more riders once they learn where I went." Caleb wiped sweat from his brow. "They'll learn nothing today." "How do you know?" He nodded toward the hills. Storm clouds were gathering again. Gray walls rolling slowly over the western ridge. Snow would fall again before night. Tracks would disappear. Anna followed his gaze. The sky darkened. Wind brushed the prairie grass flat. She let out a slow breath. "You're stubborn," Caleb warned. He stacked another log beside the cabin wall. "So I'm told." Evening settled early under the clouds. The cabin filled again with firelight. Warm gold across the rough wooden walls. Anna stirred a pot over the stove. The spoon tapped gently against iron. Caleb sat near the door cleaning his rifle. Cloth sliding along steel. Click. Click. The sounds mixed with the fire's soft breathing. Anna glanced toward the window. Snow had begun falling again. Thin white threads drifting down. Her voice lowered. "You ever think about leaving this place?" Caleb looked up once. "No. Not even if trouble comes knocking?" The rifle bolt slid closed with a sharp snap. "Trouble always knocks." Anna watched the man across the room. Firelight caught the scar along his jaw. A man who had seen storms before. Outside the wind grew louder. Snow thickened across the yard. And somewhere beyond the dark hills, riders searched the frozen prairie for a woman who was slowly learning what warmth felt like again. The storm cleared during the night. Morning light slipped across the cabin floor in long pale stripes. The stove breathed steady heat. Coffee simmered in a dented pot, sending dark bitter steam through the room. Anna Mercer stood at the small table kneading dough with slow hands. Flour dusted the wooden surface. Her fingers moved carefully, pressing and folding. The quiet rhythm filled the cabin. Across the room Caleb Ward pulled on his coat. Boot leather creaked when he stepped toward the door. Anna glanced up. "You're heading to town." Caleb slid his hat onto his head. "Supplies." Storm buried the road. Storm buries tracks too. The door opened with a groan. Cold air spilled across the warm floor. Anna watched him step outside. The door shut again. Silence returned. Only the soft thump of dough beneath her palms. And the fire snapping low inside the stove. Outside the snow glittered beneath the morning sun. Caleb saddled his horse beside the barn. The animal shifted its weight, snorting clouds of white breath. Leather straps pulled tight. Buckles clicking softly. Caleb swung into the saddle. The horse's hooves broke crusted snow with dull cracks. He rode toward the east road where the valley curved toward town. Behind him the ranch settled into quiet. Anna opened the cabin window a little. Cold air brushed her face. She listened. Wind moving across the pasture. Chickens scratching near the fence. The slow drip of melting snow from the roof. Peaceful sounds. For the first time in many weeks, she allowed herself to breathe. Later she stepped outside. The cold sunlight felt clean. She gathered split wood from the pile beside the barn. Logs knocked together with hollow clacks. One armful at a time she carried them toward the cabin. The yard smelled of damp earth and pine. A hawk cried somewhere above the ridge. Anna paused halfway across the yard. The horse in the corral lifted its head sharply. Ears forward. Body stiff. Anna followed the animal's gaze. Far out along the ridge road a rider moved through the sunlight. Just a dark shape against the snow. Watching. Not moving closer. Not leaving either. Anna's stomach tightened. She carried the wood inside without looking back. The cabin door shut hard behind her. Inside the fire glowed warmer than before. She stacked the logs beside the stove. One by one. The sound of wood striking wood echoed small in the quiet room. She forced her breathing to slow. The rider was far. Too far to reach the ranch before night. Still, the prairie had long eyes. Anna moved to the window again. The rider was gone. Only wind pushing loose snow along the ridge. But the peace had changed. Something had seen her. Hours later the sound of hooves returned. Closer this time. Caleb rode into the yard just before sunset. His horse stepped heavy through the slush. Anna stepped onto the porch. "You were gone long." Caleb slid from the saddle. Roads were slow. He carried a sack of flour and a small bundle of supplies. The porch boards creaked beneath their weight. Anna steadied his face. "You heard something." Caleb untied the saddle strap. "Town's talking." "About me?" "About a woman." The barn door groaned open as he led the horse inside. Anna followed. The air smelled of hay and warm animals. "What did they say?" Caleb hung the saddle on its peg. "Men asking questions." Anna's voice tightened. "How many?" "Enough." The horse stomped once against the stall floor. Hay rustled softly beneath its hooves. Caleb brushed snow from his coat. "They didn't know your name." Anna leaned against the barn post. "But they will." Caleb didn't answer. He finished rubbing down the horse. Then he walked back toward the cabin. Evening had fallen across the valley. The sky burned orange behind the dark hills. Wind moved low through the pasture grass. Inside the cabin the stove glowed bright again. Anna poured coffee into 2 cups. The liquid splashed softly against tin. Caleb sat near the door. His rifle rested across his knees. The fire snapped sharp between them. Anna set the cup beside him. "Did they follow you?" Caleb took a slow drink. "No." "You sure?" Caleb listened. Outside the ranch lay quiet. No hooves. No voices. Only wind brushing the barn siding. But quiet on the prairie could lodge. He set the cup down. "They're close enough." Anna looked toward the dark window. Snow had begun falling again. Thin flakes drifting through the night air. She spoke quietly. "I brought this trouble to your door." Caleb watched the fire bend around the burning logs. Trouble doesn't ask permission. The wind rose outside. Fence wire hummed low across the yard. Snow thickened against the window glass. The cabin felt smaller. Warmer. But the prairie beyond the storm was beginning to stir. And somewhere in that darkness, men were already turning their horses toward Caleb Ward's ranch. Morning broke hard and bright over the valley. The storm had moved on. Snow lay thin across the ranch, melting slowly into dark soil. Inside the cabin the stove breathed steady warmth. Anna Mercer stood near the table pouring coffee. The kettle hissed low as steam lifted toward the rafters. Across the room Caleb Ward sat beside the door. His boots rested on the floorboards. The rifle leaned within reach. Silence filled the space between them. Not empty silence. Listening silence. The kind that waited. Anna handed him the cup. The metal clicked softly against the wood. "You didn't sleep." Caleb shrugged once. "Didn't need much." Anna moved back toward the stove. The fire popped. Bright sparks jumped against the iron. Outside the wind had settled. The ranch sounded peaceful again. A chicken clucked somewhere near the barn. Snow dripped from the roof in slow steady taps. Anna allowed herself a breath. Then the sound arrived. Distant. Heavy. Hooves striking frozen ground. More than one horse. Anna froze beside the stove. The spoon in her hand tapped the iron pot once. Caleb lifted his head. Listening. The hooves grew clearer. Not rushing. Not hiding either. Just riding straight down the valley road. Caleb stood slowly. The chair legs scraped across the floor with a low wooden groan. Anna whispered. They found the ranch. Looks that way. The hooves slowed near the fence line. Leather creaked. A horse snorted sharp in the cold air. Caleb stepped toward the window. The curtain slid aside. 3 riders sat outside the gate. Black coats. Dusty hats. Watching the cabin like men measuring a grave. Anna's breath left her in a thin cloud. 3. For now. One rider pushed the gate open. The hinge shrieked loud across the quiet yard. The men rode inside slowly. No hurry. Confidence in every step of their horses. Caleb turned from the window. Stay behind me. Anna's hands tightened around the edge of the table. The cabin door opened before Caleb reached it. A gloved hand shoved it wide. Cold air rushed inside. The tallest rider stepped across the threshold. Boot heels struck the floor with dull weight. Behind him the other 2 men remained outside in the yard. Their horses shifted and stamped in the snow. The tall man removed his hat. Snowflakes slid from the brim. His smile held no warmth. Morning, Mr. Ward. Caleb didn't offer his hand. You've got business here. The man's eyes drifted across the room. Firelight. Table. Then Anna. Recognition sparked slow across his face. There you are. Anna stepped back. Her shoulder touched the wall. The man chuckled softly. I figured you wouldn't make it far in that storm. Caleb shifted slightly between them. The floor creaked beneath his boots. You're trespassing. The man ignored him. His eyes never left Anna. Victor Hale sends his regards. The name landed heavy in the cabin. Anna's voice barely rose above a whisper. I'm not going back. The man laughed. Low. Amused. Oh. You are. Behind him the horses outside snorted again. Hooves scraped impatiently against the frozen yard. Caleb's hand rested near the rifle. Conversation's over. The man's smile faded. He studied Caleb now. Really studied him. You must be the rancher. That's right. The man slipped his hat back on. Mr. Hale doesn't enjoy chasing lost property. Anna's face hardened. I'm not property. The rider's gaze slid toward her again. Paper says otherwise. Caleb's voice cut through the room. Paper don't ride horses. Silence fell. The fire cracked sharply behind them. The rider took one slow step forward. Close enough that Caleb could smell leather and tobacco. Mr. Hale would prefer this stay civil. Caleb didn't move. Then he picked the wrong door. Outside one of the men shifted in the saddle. Spurs jingled faintly. The rider in the doorway studied Caleb another moment. Then he smiled again. Thin this time. We'll give you the day. He turned toward the door. Boot heels thudding against the floorboards. Cold air rushed in again when the door swung open. The 2 riders outside straightened in their saddles. The tall man mounted his horse slowly. Leather straps creaked. Before riding away he looked back once. Snowflakes drifted between them. Victor Hale rides this way tomorrow. His horse snorted and turned toward the valley road. The other riders followed. Hooves faded slowly into the distance. Caleb stood in the doorway long after the sound disappeared. The wind returned to the ranch. Fence wire humming soft across the pasture. Behind him Anna spoke quietly. He's coming himself. Caleb stepped back inside and closed the door. The latch clicked. The rifle lifted from the wall. His voice was calm. "Then tomorrow we'll be ready." The riders left deep tracks across the melting snow. By noon the wind had softened them. By afternoon the sun began swallowing them. But the ranch no longer felt quiet. Inside the cabin the stove burned hot. Logs cracked and settled in the iron belly. Anna Mercer stood beside the table wrapping bandages around a stack of rifle cartridges. The cloth pulled tight with each careful fold. Across the room Caleb Ward moved slow and steady. He checked the rifle once more. Steel sliding clean through the bolt. Click. Click. The sound echoed softly against the wooden walls. Anna watched him for a moment. "They'll bring more men." Caleb slid the bolt closed. "They usually do." Outside the wind pushed through the fence rails. A low whistle across the pasture. Anna tied off the last strip of cloth. "You should let me leave before morning." Caleb shook his head. "They'd follow you anyway. They might spare the ranch." Caleb looked up then. His voice stayed calm. "Men like Hale don't spare things." Silence followed. The fire popped sharp behind them. Anna lowered her gaze. Her hands rested still on the table. Evening crept slowly over the valley. Snowmelt dripped from the roof in steady taps. The sky turned copper along the western ridge. Caleb stepped outside. Cold air brushed across his face. The pasture stretched quiet and wide beneath the fading light. He walked toward the fence line where the riders had passed earlier. Boots pressed into wet soil. The ground sucked softly beneath each step. He crouched beside a cedar post. A fresh mark cut deep into the wood. A knife scar. Rough letters carved across the grain. Ward. The mark had not been there that morning. Caleb traced the cut with his thumb. The wood still smelled sharp. Someone had ridden close while the sun was high. Watching. Waiting. Behind him the barn door creaked open. Anna stepped into the yard. "You found something." Caleb stood and turned the post slightly. The carved letters faced her. Anna's breath tightened. "They were here already." "Looks that way." Wind moved across the pasture. Fence wire hummed low. Anna glanced toward the hills. "How close?" Caleb looked across the valley. Dark shapes moved along the far ridge. Tiny against the sky. But there. Watching. Close enough. Anna wrapped her coat tighter around her shoulders. "They want you to feel it." "Feel what?" "That they can reach you anytime." Caleb said nothing. He simply pulled the knife from his belt and cut the carved letters deeper. The blade scraped across the wood with a harsh sound. Anna watched him work. "You're not afraid of them." Caleb slid the knife away. "Afraid wastes daylight." They walked back toward the cabin together. The yard felt smaller now. Like the hills had leaned closer. Inside the stove glowed brighter against the growing dark. Anna set a pot of beans over the fire. The lid rattled lightly as it heated. Caleb leaned his rifle beside the door. Outside the wind shifted colder again. Night creeping down from the mountains. Anna stirred the pot slowly. The spoon tapped soft against iron. "You ever fight men like Hale before?" Caleb sat near the door. Boot heels resting against the floor. "Men like Hale are everywhere." "That's not what I asked." The fire cracked. A log collapsed into glowing embers. Caleb's voice stayed low. "Once or twice." Anna steadied his face. "Did you win?" Caleb looked toward the dark window. "Still here." The beans began to bubble. Steam rose thick and warm into the room. Anna poured 2 bowls. The smell filled the cabin. For a moment the place felt almost normal again. Then the horse outside screamed. A sharp, violent sound. Both of them were on their feet instantly. Caleb grabbed the rifle. Anna rushed to the door. Cold night air slammed into them. The horse in the corral reared against the fence. Eyes wide. Breath exploding white. Something moved beyond the fence line. A shadow slipping through the dark. Hooves struck once against frozen ground, then vanished toward the ridge. Caleb ran to the fence. Snow crunched hard beneath his boots. The horse settled slowly, but fresh tracks cut across the pasture again. One rider this time, close enough to touch the corral before leaving. Anna stepped beside him. "They're testing you." Caleb nodded once. "Seeing how fast we wake." Anna looked toward the hills. The night stretched wide and empty again, but the feeling of eyes remained. Caleb turned back toward the cabin. The door creaked open. Firelight spilled into the yard. Behind them the wind carried a faint sound from the dark ridge. A distant laugh. Thin. Cold. The riders were closer than before. And tomorrow Victor Hale would ride in person. Dawn arrived gray and quiet. Snow clouds still hung low over the valley. The ranch looked small beneath a heavy sky. Inside the cabin the stove burned low. Caleb Ward sat near the door sharpening a knife. Steel scraped slowly along the whetstone. Shhht. Shhht. The sound filled the room. Anna Mercer stood beside the window watching the ridge. Her breath fogged the glass. The prairie beyond the hills remained empty. "For now. You don't have to stay," she said quietly. The knife paused in Caleb's hand. "I already stayed." Anna turned. "You could still ride out before they come." Caleb resumed the slow sharpening. Shhht. Shhht. They'd follow. You don't know that. Caleb lifted the blade toward the firelight. The steel gleamed clean. Men like Hale always follow. Silence settled again. The stove popped softly. Outside a crow called from the cedar trees. Anna folded her arms tight around herself. Cold crept through the cabin walls despite the fire. Finally she spoke again. "You deserve the truth." Caleb set the knife on the table. "Thought I might." Anna moved closer to the stove. Her hands hovered over the heat. Flames bent around the burning log. "My father owned land east of the valley." Caleb listened. "Dry land," she continued. "Hard land. But one place held water year-round." Caleb's eyes lifted. "A spring." Anna nodded. "Deep and clean. Enough to keep cattle alive through summer." The fire cracked loudly. Anna's voice dropped lower. "Victor Hale wanted it." Caleb leaned back in his chair. "Let me guess. Your father said no." Anna stared into the flames. 3 months later he died. Wind pushed against the cabin walls. The rafters creaked overhead. Caleb spoke carefully. "Accident. That's what the town said." Anna looked up. "But Hale brought papers the very next day." "What kind of papers?" "Debt papers. Land transfer. Everything signed." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "Your father couldn't sign them if he was already dead." Anna's fingers tightened around the stove edge. "He didn't." The silence grew heavier. Outside the wind shifted across the pasture. Anna's voice trembled only slightly now. "Hale said the land would belong to him unless I honored the contract." "And you ran?" Anna shook her head slowly. "No." The fire snapped. Anna reached into the pocket of her coat. A folded piece of parchment slid into her hand. The paper looked worn. Edges dark with travel. She set it on the table. Caleb unfolded it carefully. The paper crackled in the quiet room. A rough map covered the surface. Creek beds. Fence lines. And a dark circle marked near the center. The spring. "Survey map," Caleb said. Anna nodded. "My father had it drawn before he died." "Proof the land is yours?" "Yes." Caleb folded the paper again. "So why didn't you show it in town?" Anna laughed once. Short and bitter. "Hale owns half the town." Outside the wind carried a faint distant sound. Hooves. Both of them froze. Caleb moved to the window. The curtain shifted slightly. Across the ridge dark shapes appeared. 5 riders this time. Moving slow. Confident. Anna stepped beside him. He brought more. Caleb counted them again. 6. A 7th rider crested the hill behind the others. Tall horse. Wide shoulders. Even from that distance the man rode differently. Controlled. Patient. Anna's breath caught. That's him. Victor Hale. The riders spread slightly as they descended the ridge. Snow kicked up behind their horses. The valley filled with the faint thunder of hooves. Caleb let the curtain fall. Inside the cabin the fire burned louder now. The warm air suddenly felt thin. Anna's voice dropped to a whisper. If he takes the map, the land is gone. Caleb handed the parchment back to her. Then don't let him. Anna stared at him. You can't fight 7 men. Caleb stood. The floorboards creaked beneath his boots. The rifle lifted from its place beside the door. He checked the chamber. Click. Outside the hooves grew louder. The riders were halfway across the valley now. Snow scattering beneath their horses. Anna folded the map and tucked it beneath her coat. You still have time to leave. Caleb opened the cabin door. Cold air rushed inside. The wind carried the sound of approaching men. He stepped onto the porch. Boots striking the boards with dull weight. The prairie stretched wide before him. 7 riders coming through the snow. Behind him Anna stood in the doorway. Her voice quiet. They'll kill you for this. Caleb rested the rifle across the porch rail. His eyes never left the riders. They'll have to try. The riders came down the ridge slow. Snow scattered beneath their horses. Hooves struck frozen ground in a steady drum. Caleb Ward stood on the porch with the rifle resting across the rail. Cold wind pressed against his coat. Behind him the cabin door stood half open. Firelight glowed warm through the doorway. Anna Mercer watched from the shadow inside. The valley held its breath. The riders crossed the pasture fence without asking. The gate creaked wide. Leather saddles groaned as the men shifted in their seats. 7 of them. Black coats. Hard faces. At their center rode Victor Hale. Tall in the saddle. Gray hat pulled low over calm eyes. His horse stepped forward first. Snow crunched beneath iron shoes. Caleb did not move. The rifle stayed steady across the rail. Hale lifted a gloved hand. The other riders stopped behind him. Their horses snorted clouds of white breath. Silence spread across the yard. Only the wind whispering through the fence wire. Hale tipped his hat slightly. "Morning, Mr. Ward." Caleb answered without warmth. "Morning." Hale's gaze drifted toward the cabin door. He smiled. "Miss Mercer." Anna stepped onto the porch beside Caleb. Cold air brushed her face. Her voice stayed steady. "You won't take me back." Hale chuckled softly. "My dear, you misunderstand." His horse shifted closer. Snow broke under its hooves. "You were never meant to run." Anna's hand tightened around the edge of the doorframe. "You murdered my father." The men behind Hale shifted in their saddles. A few quiet laughs. Hale sighed. "Your father made poor decisions." Caleb spoke then. Conversations drifting. Hale looked at him. For the first time. Studied him carefully. "You must be the rancher everyone in town talks about." Caleb rested his hand lightly on the rifle. "Talk travels easy." Hale nodded slowly. "Yes it does." The wind lifted across the pasture. Fence wire hummed low. Hale continued. "Mr. Ward, this is a business matter." "Looks more like trespassing." One of the riders behind Hale laughed. The sound snapped short when Hale raised a finger. He looked back toward Anna. "You possess property belonging to me." Anna's voice sharpened. "The land is mine." Hale smiled wider. The papers say otherwise. Caleb reached slowly into his coat. The riders stiffened, hands drifting toward holsters. Caleb pulled out a folded parchment. The survey map. He held it up where the wind could move its edges. The paper cracked softly. Hale's eyes narrowed. "So you found it." Caleb unfolded the map slowly. The marks of the spring showed clear. "This here proves the land belongs to her father." Hale shrugged. "Proof means little without a judge." Caleb nodded. "Town judge already saw it." Hale's smile faltered slightly. Caleb continued calmly. "Gave a copy to Sheriff Dalton this morning." The riders shifted again. Murmurs passed quietly between them. Hale's eyes hardened. "You rode to town yesterday?" "Sure did." "And you think that changes anything?" Caleb folded the map again. Tucked it back into his coat. "No." The rifle lifted from the rail. Smooth. Unhurried. "But it means you can't take her quiet anymore." Silence slammed across the yard. Wind stopped. Even the horses seemed to listen. Hale leaned slightly in his saddle. "You believe the law protects you?" Caleb's voice stayed level. "I believe the law slows you down." Hale studied him, then laughed. Low and cold. "You think 7 men fear a rancher and a piece of paper?" Caleb sighted down the rifle. The barrel aimed directly at Hale's chest. "I think 6 men fear what happens after the first shot." The horses shifted nervously. Leather creaked. A rider on the far side slid his hand toward his revolver. Caleb's voice cut through the yard. "Don't." The man froze. Wind returned. Soft at first, then stronger. Snow began drifting again across the pasture. Anna stood behind Caleb, her breath shallow. Hale's eyes flicked between them. "You'd start a war over a woman?" Caleb answered without looking back. "No." The rifle stayed steady. "Over a home." One of Hale's riders laughed nervously. Another spat into the snow. The moment stretched thin. Then Hale lifted his hand again. The riders eased slightly in their saddles. Hale leaned forward in his saddle. His voice dropped quiet. "You fire that rifle, Mr. Ward. You'll never sleep easy again." Caleb's finger rested along the trigger guard. "Sleep's been hard before." A gust of wind swept across the yard. Snow swirled between the horses. Hale studied the ranch one last time. The cabin. The barn. The stubborn man on the porch. Finally he straightened in the saddle. His voice turned cold. "This isn't finished." Caleb didn't lower the rifle. "Never thought it was." Hale turned his horse. Leather straps creaked. The animals stepped through the snow. One by one the other riders followed. Hooves fading slowly across the valley. Anna let out a breath she had been holding. The wind moved through the pasture again. Fence wire humming softly. Caleb stood on the porch until the riders disappeared beyond the ridge. Only then did he lower the rifle. Behind him the cabin fire crackled warm in the doorway. But far across the valley the storm had only begun. The riders disappeared beyond the ridge. Snow drifted slowly across the valley after them. Silence returned to Caleb Ward's ranch. But it was not the same silence. Anna Mercer stood on the porch with both hands wrapped around the doorframe. Her breath came slow now. Cold air filled her lungs. Caleb lowered the rifle and rested it against the rail. The wood of the porch creaked beneath his boots. Neither of them spoke for a while. Only the wind moving across the pasture. Fence wire humming soft. Finally Anna stepped down into the yard. Snow crunched beneath her boots. "They'll come back." Caleb nodded. "Men like Hale don't leave empty-handed." Anna looked toward the ridge where the riders had vanished. Her voice dropped. "You should know the whole truth before that happens." Caleb glanced toward her. "Figured we were close already." Anna wrapped her coat tighter around her shoulders. The cold had returned with the wind. She stepped toward the fence line. Caleb followed slowly. They walked past the barn, past the corral where the horse shifted and snorted softly. The ranch looked peaceful again, almost ordinary. Anna stopped beside the cedar post where Hale's men had carved Caleb's name. The knife scar cut deep through the wood. She rested her hand on it. My father didn't just own that spring. Caleb waited. The land around it feeds half the valley. Caleb frowned slightly. Anna turned toward the hills. The water doesn't stop there. Wind pushed her hair across her face. She brushed it away. My father dug a narrow channel from the spring years ago. For cattle? She shook her head. For the farms. Caleb studied her. The farms west of the valley. Anna nodded. 3 small ranches. Families who can afford wells. The wind shifted colder. Fence wire sang low across the pasture. Anna continued. If Hale takes that spring, those ranches dry up by summer. Caleb leaned against the fence rail. So it isn't just about your land. Anna's voice stayed steady. No. She looked toward the distant hills again. Hale wants the water. And once he owns the water, he owns the valley. The truth hung heavy between them. The prairie stretched quiet around the ranch. A hawk circled high above the snowfields. Caleb let out a slow breath. Town knows this. Anna gave a tired smile. Town suspects. But no one speaks. Hale buys silence. Caleb nodded slowly. The wind pressed against the barn door. It creaked open slightly before settling again. Anna reached into her coat and pulled out the folded map. The parchment cracked softly as she opened it. She held it flat against the fence rail. Caleb stepped closer. The marks of the spring showed clear. But now Anna pointed farther west. Thin lines carved into the map. Channels running like veins through the valley. Caleb traced them with a finger. Your father planned irrigation. Yes. He told the valley ranchers? Anna shook her head. He wanted to finish the channels first. Caleb looked back toward the hills. Then Hale found out. Anna folded the map again. He found the survey notes. Her voice dropped quieter. And the day after that, my father died. The wind rose suddenly across the pasture. Snow lifted in thin spirals around their boots. Caleb pushed his hat lower. Sheriff Dalton saw the map. Yes. He'll stand with you? Anna hesitated. I think so. The hesitation lingered. Caleb noticed. You're not sure. Anna looked toward the valley road. He's a good man. But Hale's money talks loud. Anna nodded once. Silence returned. The ranch breathed quietly beneath the gray sky. Then the horse in the corral stamped hard. Caleb's head lifted instantly. He turned toward the ridge. A single rider appeared there. Just one. Far away. Watching. The horse stood still against the skyline. Anna's voice tightened. One of Hale's men. Caleb nodded. Messenger. The rider stayed there only a moment. Then turned the horse and rode away. Anna watched until he disappeared. They're not done. Caleb picked up a small stone and tossed it into the snow. No. Anna folded the map carefully and slipped it back inside her coat. What happens when they come again? Caleb walked back toward the cabin. Boots crunching steady across the yard. Anna followed. The stove inside the cabin glowed warm through the window. Smoke curled gently from the chimney. Caleb opened the door. Warm air spilled across the cold porch. Anna stepped inside behind him. The fire crackled bright. The kettle whispered softly on the iron plate. Caleb leaned the rifle beside the door. Then he looked at her. You're not just protecting land. Anna met his eyes. I know. You're protecting everyone downstream. She nodded slowly. The cabin felt smaller now. But warmer too. Outside the wind howled across the valley. Snow thickened again against the window. Anna spoke quietly. My father used to say water makes neighbors. Or enemies. Caleb poured 2 cups of coffee. The liquid splashed softly into tin. He handed one to her. His voice stayed calm. Looks like we just became both. Anna wrapped her hands around the warm cup. The fire snapped sharp in the stove. Outside the storm rolled in again. And somewhere beyond the white hills, Victor Hale was already planning his return. Spring arrived slow in the valley. The last snow melted into soft dark earth. Water ran steady through the shallow channels cut across the pasture. The sound followed the wind like quiet music. On Caleb Ward's ranch the cabin door creaked open with the morning light. Warm air rolled out into the yard. Inside the stove still glowed red beneath a kettle. Coffee simmered slow. The smell drifted across the porch. Anna Mercer stepped outside carrying a bucket. Her boots pressed into damp soil instead of snow. Birds called from the cedar trees along the ridge. The valley had changed. Water trickled through the narrow channel beside the fence line. Clear. Steady. Alive. Anna walked toward it and dipped the bucket. The water splashed softly inside the iron rim. Behind her the barn door groaned open. Caleb Ward stepped out with a coil of rope over his shoulder. The horse snorted warm breath into the morning air. Caleb crossed the yard slowly. Boots sinking into soft earth. He stopped beside the channel. Watched the water moving past the fence. You widened it. Anna nodded. Just a little. The bucket lifted. Water sloshed against the sides. The valley ranchers came yesterday, she said. Caleb leaned against the fence. Figured they might. They brought tools. The wind pushed across the pasture. Fence wire hummed gently. Anna continued. We finished the west channel before sunset. Caleb looked toward the hills. Small lines of water now spread across the valley floor. Silver threads in the morning light. Your father would have liked that. Anna smiled softly. I think he would. A rooster crowed somewhere near the neighbor's ridge. The sound carried far across the open land. Peaceful. Steady. The ranch felt alive now. Not silent the way it once had. Anna set the bucket beside the porch. Steam rose from the coffee pot through the open window. She stepped inside. Plates touched the wooden table. The soft clink echoed warmly through the cabin. Caleb followed a moment later. Boots thudding lightly across the floorboards. The stove crackled with fresh wood. Anna poured 2 cups of coffee. The dark liquid splashed into tin. They sat at the table facing the window. Sunlight poured across the floor. The same window that once watched the storm. Anna spoke quietly. Sheriff Dalton rode through yesterday. Caleb lifted an eyebrow. News? Anna nodded. Hale's land deal was thrown out. Caleb sipped his coffee. Figured that might happen. The map helped. Silence settled gently between them. The kind of silence that didn't carry fear. Outside the water kept running. Anna looked toward the channel again. The ranchers will keep the spring open. Caleb nodded. Means the valley survives the summer. Anna leaned back slightly in the chair. You gave them that chance. Caleb shrugged. Water did. The wind pushed softly against the cabin walls. The place felt warmer than it had all winter. After breakfast Caleb stepped outside again. He carried a hammer and a new cedar board. The fence near the road still held the old knife scour. Ward carved deep into the wood. Caleb pulled the board loose. The nails screeched softly as they came free. Anna watched from the porch. You leaving it behind? Caleb tossed the scarred board into the scrap pile. Some marks don't need saving. He nailed the fresh board into place. The hammer rang sharp against the quiet yard. Anna stepped down from the porch. The sun warmed the earth beneath her boots. What about Hale? Caleb wiped sweat from his brow. Last anyone heard, he rode south. Gone for good? Caleb shrugged. Men like him don't stay gone. Anna studied the hills. The prairie stretched wide and calm. But the valley knows now. Caleb nodded. That helps. The horse stamped softly in the corral. Wind moved across the pasture. The water in the channel glimmered bright. Anna walked to the edge of the stream. She knelt and touched the surface. Cold. Clear. The same spring her father once guarded. But now the water flowed beyond the ranch. Toward the other families. Toward the valley. Toward a future that belonged to more than one man. Behind her the cabin door creaked again. Caleb stepped onto the porch with 2 tin cups. Coffee steaming into the morning air. He handed one to her. Anna stood beside him at the fence. They watched the water running through the channel. The sound steady. Comforting. Months earlier the ranch had been silent. Wind and snow and empty rooms. Now the valley carried different sounds. Children shouting somewhere near the far pasture. Axes splitting wood along the ridge. Water moving through new earth. Anna lifted her cup. You know what I hear? Caleb looked toward the valley. What's that? Anna listened to the running channel. The wind through the fence wire. The soft creak of the porch boards behind them. Life. Caleb nodded once. The prairie stretched gold beneath the rising sun. Water kept flowing through the valley. And for the first time in a long while, Caleb Ward's ranch sounded like home. If this story stirred a memory or two, saddle up with us again, hit subscribe and help keep these old frontier tales alive. Out here, every name, every trail, every sunset still matters. So till we meet again, friend, keep your hat tipped to the past, and your heart pointed west.